When you use the variable studio, there are 4 values in here that you can adjust that will automatically scale the Thrifty Elevator. The first value here is the distance between the outside rails. So that was set at 16 inches. And if you measure from here to here, you'll see that's 16 inches. The second value is the first stage height. Right now I have it set to 48 inches. It's actually going to be the distance from the bottom of the rail here to the top of the tube on the outside. 48 inches. And that's really, if you're using the max tube, that's the maximum distance it can be because it comes in a 47-inch long piece. If you're using something other than that, just regular 2x1 or the Vex Versa tube, it could be longer. The next value, the inner stage height, we have it set at 6 inches. That is actually the height from top to bottom of the carriage here. So if we measure from that face to the bottom, that's at 6 inches. So you can adjust that if you need to make it smaller or taller to fit whatever's going to go inside of it. And the last value here is the extension sides. Right now it's set to 2.5 inches. That is going to scale this bottom rail. It tells you how far from your exterior face and you'll want to also account for the gearboxes and their location, especially the motors within the frame perimeter. All of this has to be within your frame perimeter. You may want to look at some of the new options from Rev Robotics that have the 90-degree max planetary gearbox. If you want to either turn this 90 degrees vertical or horizontal. Those are really cool, brand new options that have just come out. So definitely take a look at those to help the packaging installation be a little bit easier. And yeah, we just wanted to try to provide a model that you could come in and import into your design with some flexibility here. Just because we show things at a certain length or a certain width, it doesn't necessarily mean you have to do that. Definitely scale and adjust this elevator as needed to fit your robot's design, and do that preferably before cutting any metal in your shop. So definitely come into Onshape and use this resource, use the variable studio and scale your elevator so that it fits your robot design. And then you can import this into your Onshape model, or you could always come in and export out a copy of this, maybe a step file, if you need to import it into a different CAD application. So hopefully that's helpful, and just let us know if you have any questions or need any additional help. All right, let's mark the length of our base piece here. This is the piece that will attach to the robot. Making it 25 inches long, but again, you can scale this to the size that you want it to be. And then we're using this nice little jig that we've 3D printed. It has offset studs so that you can line up your saw blade for 1/2 inch or 1/4 inch cuts. So pretty handy. We'll put the link for that into the video. And it just snaps on like that. So you can basically line your saw blade up with it. Then you would remove it once you get it all clamped up and cut it. All right, so we're going to open our sliding bearing block kit bags. If you have a single stage kit, you'll just have one of these. If you have a two-stage kit, you'll have two of them. The process is really the same. There are enough parts for 4 sliding blocks in each bag. And it helps to just kind of go through and sort the parts here real quick so you can see what all you got and double check it against the page in the assembly guide to make sure you have everything. So once you've sorted through all these, it should look something like this. You have 8 of your 1/2 inch bearings, 8 of your 3/4 bearings, 4 plates, 4 zip ties, 4 of the steel dowel rods, 16 of the 1032 lock nuts and the 1032 button head bolts, 8 of the 1/4 inch, 1 inch long bolts, and 8 of the 1/4 inch lock nuts and 8 spacers. Okay, so we're going to take our 1/2 inch bearings, slip those onto the dowel rod. And then you can line that up with the plate. You want to make sure that the bearings can roll, smooth at this point. If you're finding that it's getting caught on the edge here, so make sure those bearings can spin right now. If they're getting caught on the edges, you may want to take this off and just make sure that the bearings aren't too far past the edge of the dowel rod. Then we got the zip tie. There's this little recess in here in the plate, and really that's just for the large nub of the zip tie to kind of live inside. There's a little slot on the back too, so you just slide it through there, come around to the other hole. This really just helps hold it in. You can tighten it up to a certain extent, and then snip off that excess. Push it down in there. And it just kind of lives in there. And that'll make sure that, if you have to take this apart, that this doesn't just fall out on you, or when you're assembling it, it's kind of like just a way to retain that in there. All right, and now we're going to take our 1/4 inch button heads, and you're going to put the bearing on that first, the 3/4 bearing, and your spacer. And these are threaded. We do provide a lock nut just so that they don't back out on you, but you probably don't have to use those necessarily. This bolt is longer too in that regard, so you could pick up this on the back side potentially if you wanted to attach something else there. You're going to do that on both sides. And then I'm going to put my lock nut on. Just getting that started here. The lock nuts. Okay, and once you snug that up, this should still spin. If you've tightened it too much, I guess this could bind. I haven't really seen that, but this should still be able to spin right now. So if you can't, you may want to back it off just a little bit and not over tighten it. Okay, so that's what one of them looks like. You're going to rinse, repeat here, and do this for all the other bearing blocks that you have in your kit. Okay, so now we're going to start to build up the overall structure of the elevator. This is our base frame piece that's going to attach, to your drivetrain, swerve, whatever. This would be like the crossbar on the bottom. We're going to use Cleco rivets a lot. These are temporary rivets, and it's something that we really recommend teams pick up. We'll put a link to some on Amazon in the video description. What these do is allow you to temporarily put things together prior to riveting or bolting things together. And it lets you build up your whole structure, or at least a lot of it, and make sure things are going to move properly, that you have enough clearance, that things are going to work before you kind of finalize everything. This also just lets you adjust things if you need to, if something needs to move a whole pattern over or whole space over, this gives you that. So what we're going to do is on these bottom ones, we're going to have these facing this direction. And to use these Cleco pliers, like you just squeeze, and then you stick the mandrel piece into that and let go, and it holds it on there. Generally, you want to have at least two. And since we're using the pre-punched tubing, I mean, this is real easy mode since the holes are already there. So we're going to do the same thing on the other side. And then we're going to flip it around and do the same thing on the opposite side. Okay, so now we have like our base gussets here, and we're going to take the lawn parts, the lawn outside frame members. Ours are just 47-inch lawn pieces of 2x1 tubing, and we're going to also Cleco those onto these gussets. You're going to do the same thing on the opposite side as well. Okay, so now we've got kind of our main frame started here. And this is just a zoomed out view so you can see, pretty large right now. This is going to be the external rails that the next stage is going to slide within. Okay, so now we're going to install our bearing blocks on the top of our elevator frame. These slots, two of them will line up with the standard grid pattern tubing, and then two are more inward. If you want to use all four holes, not saying that you have to, but you'll be able to mark and transfer drill through these two slots once we get these two on there. So you have your 1032 by 5/8 button heads. These are pretty long, just in case you end up using 1/8-inch wall tubing. I know a lot of teams don't, but some teams do. All right, so we're going to take our 1032 lock nuts and start our 5/8 bolts in them. Get two of those in there. And then use a 3/8 wrench and a 1/8-inch hex driver to snug those up. And you can see these two slots on the bottom. If you want to use them, you can drill out more inward here and there and put either 3/16 rivets. We give you enough bolts for all 4 holes, so if you want to use more of those, you can. Now is also a good time to go ahead and install your top bearing plates. You can either use punch tubing existing holes and mount that there, or if you want it to be flush, you could drill new ones. And you can go ahead and install your hex bearing. There are some small 832 screws, and these are threaded holes that you just thread those screws into. Probably want to use a little Loctite on these to make sure they don't back out on you later. But the point of this is to grab the edge of the bearing and ensure it doesn't come out on you. Okay, just one other thing to consider when you're assembling this is when you're getting your 2 top bearing plates put on, I recommend putting a length of hex shaft between the 2 before you snug up both sides, just to make sure that this is going to spin and just to make sure they're aligned. If you don't do this, there's a chance that maybe things aren't 100% aligned, and you might have a harder time later sliding this hex shaft in. So when assembling your sliding stage here, you're going to use the thinner gussets. The purpose of these is so that bearings can slide on the rail. So that's why they're thinner on one edge. And we're just going to use the same method that we've been using with our clecos and our rivets. Makes assembly go pretty quick. And you'll want to do that for all 4 corners. So now we're going to attach our 2 bearing blocks on the inside sliding stage. These will end up at the bottom of the elevator, but you can go ahead and attach those now. All right, so we have our elevator frame that's going to attach to the robot, and we have our first sliding stage here all framed out. Now is a great time, because we don't have a crossbar or anything in here yet. This is all still pretty flexible, to insert this into your structure. And you should be able to visually see that, things look as they should. There's a 1/2 inch gap pretty much all the way down between the 2 stages. So that's a good sign. Next, we can put that cross member in and just kind of validate that this is actually going to work. Okay, so we're going to use those 5 inch to the really long 1032 bolts that come in the chain drive kit, and our aluminum spacers that come in that kit as well. And we've cut a piece of 2x1 that's going to span between the first stage, the outside stage here. And really what that's doing is framing out the elevator and keeping compression at the top the same as the bottom, so you get consistent movement as the elevator moves up and down. So you're going to insert the bolt. Make sure you're putting the crossbar on the same side as your top bearing blocks, because later when we run the pulleys and everything, if you're doing a two-stage, you want to make sure that the crossbar is on that side so you can mount the clamping plates for your Dyneema cables. All right, we've got our crossbar in. That's framing out the top of the elevator here, and let's see, things are sliding pretty decently here. So we're not really seeing any binding as we move it, which is good. Now's a good time to go ahead and we could start swapping some of these clecos out for actual rivets. You could use bolts in some spaces, but we really like rivets. They're just low profile, and it makes sure nothing snags as things are moving here on the elevator. Okay, so we're framing out our carriage now using the same method as we've used with the rest of the elevator. We got cleco rivets, we have our gussets on the corners, and again, we're just framing all of this out. We're going to insert our bearing blocks onto the corners, top and bottom, and we've went ahead and removed one of the bolts so we can get the carriage into the first stage of the elevator. And then we'll put that bolt and bearing back in to secure it in there. And we'll attach the bearing blocks now, just using the same method as before. We'll do that on all four corners. Okay, so now we're going to slide the carriage into the first sliding stage here. All right, you can test and see that it actually slides. And now we can reinstall the 3/4 inch bearings on here to lock the carriage in. All right, we've reinstalled all those bearings and the carriage is sliding pretty smoothly by hand. So now that we're seeing that, we'll go ahead and secure the... Okay, so all we've done now is duplicated the chain setup on each side. Same process, tension it. We've got one going on the left, one going on the right. Yeah, so we're going to tighten those up and secure them to the chain attachment pieces. Okay, so we're starting to add the chain tensioner into the chain setup, and you'll just want to make sure that you break the chain in a spot that will allow you to actually tension it. You don't want to take too much chain out, but you also don't want to leave too much either, because the tensioner will probably give you another 1/2 inch pull total. So what I do is I wrap the chain all the way around. I've actually put it on the chain attachment block on the sprocket, trying to make sure everything's lined up, and then see where that ends up, and then take or break the chain in that spot. So that's what we'll do next. All right, so we're gonna press the pin on the chain back through the other side of the chain tensioner. So you can take your chain, we've got the pin in it still. Just makes it a lot easier to work with if you don't push it all the way out. And then this should snap in there. And we'll use the other side of the chain brake, push the pin back in. And that's on there really nicely now. Now we've got pins on both sides. You'll want to add your jam nuts now. Make sure those go on. And we should be ready to loop this chain around our sprocket, our top and bottom sprockets, and attach it to the chain attachment part on the elevator. And then to start to tension these, you're just going to twist this center threaded piece. And it's going to pull, since one side is left hand thread and one side is right hand thread, it's going to pull both of these studs together. So as you do that, the chain is going to tighten up. Okay, so we're attaching our chain onto the elevator. We've got it wrapped around the bottom sprocket, and we've got the chain attachment posts going through the 25 chain. Something to note here is for your chain tensioner, you got to think when this first sliding stage is going to raise up, this chain tensioner is going to go down with the rest of the chain. So you got to make sure that's not going to hit anything in the travel path. That's why I put it on the outside here, almost at the top. And the chain is pretty loose right now, so that's good because it lets you get it on there and make sure everything's aligned. You may want some collars or spacers to help keep the sprockets from sliding left and right on the top and bottom shafts here. And once your chain is pretty tight, you want to go ahead and use these jam nuts and run them against the center tensioning piece. You'll want to use a wrench to really kind of make sure they snug up. And that ensures that the posts don't back out over time as this is running. And now I can go ahead and secure the M3 nuts, secure the chain with the M3 nuts on the chain attachment piece. And I just do a test here, make sure that these chain tensioners, I have them pretty high up, but that is to try to give me the most amount of travel out of the elevator. If this is too low, you run into the potential of the tensioner hitting the sprocket down here and losing some travel that way. So I mount it pretty high. You can adjust that if you find your tensioner is not exactly where you want it to be in the path of travel. You just take it apart so that both halves come apart. You move where the chain is attached on the block, and yeah, it's pretty easy to adjust. Okay, now we're starting to mount our Dyneema pulley kits. You're going to mount these brackets on the first sliding stage, and again, this is for if you have a carriage in here. If you don't have a carriage, and you're just doing a single sliding stage, you're probably done at this point. So congratulations if that's you. If you're wanting the sliding carriage here, you're going to need the Dyneema pulley kits. We're going to use those 2 1/4 inch long 1032 bolts. Just go straight through this side into the threaded number 10 holes on the bracket and use Loctite on those. And you'll do 2 on the bottom and 2 up top here. Now we're going to install the pulleys with the 1/4 bolt in the kit. Pulley should fit between there, and 1/4 inch bolt, 1/4 bolt should slide right through. Lock nut goes on. When you tighten this up, you still want the pulley to be able to spin. If you tighten it up too much, it really shouldn't be binding. So don't crank it so hard that it's going to bind. So now we're installing the tensioning mechanism on our elevator carriage. So to do that, we've got our 3 inch long, it's the longest 1032 bolt. We've got our washer on here and our number 10 lock nut on the back side. And then this is the Dyneema tensioning piece that comes in the kit. And there's a through hole for that. And you'll use the 2.5 inch long bolt for that one to mount it. And we'll get a video here, but basically the cable is going to come up through here, around this bolt, into the tensioning piece, and then you can use your wrench to have the rope wrap around this. And then usually I use like a zip tie or something just to secure it there on this part. Okay, so we have our Dyneema cable. I do a couple of wraps around the bolt here behind the washer, and then go through the through hole here in the tensioning piece. So just like that, pull the rope through, get that snugged up, and then you can wrap this around the tensioning piece a couple times. And then I take just a zip tie, all right, so we ran our Dyneema rope around. Let's go for the full path here just so you understand it. So The rope, this is at the bottom of the elevator. It goes around this pulley underneath and back up through, around this bolt a couple times, and then through the tensioning piece. And then we secured all that. And then if you follow the rope up the elevator, and then it goes over the top pulley that's on the first sliding stage around, and it's going, let's flip the elevator around so you can see it better. It is going up and over, and it is being clamped on the crossbar, and the other part is going all the way down here to the carriage. So it starts and stops on the carriage, and it slides over the pulleys which are installed on the first sliding stage. So hopefully that makes sense. Basically, it's creating a fixed length of cable from the carriage end to end by being clamped on that crossbar. All right, now that we've run our Dyneema rope here, it's time to attach the clamping plate to the crossbar. So we have the thicker of the two plates in the kit. It's the one with all the threaded holes in it. And we've got it mounted here where these 4 holes are being picked up by the 1032 bolts. They're 1 1/4 inch long, and they're just going through here. I haven't snugged them up yet, but that's what they're doing. They're holding that base plate on. And then we're going to take the thinner of the 2 plates and basically clamp that cable with it in the back. And you'll use your 6 short 3/8 1032 bolts for that. And now's a good time to test to make sure that everything is moving kind of as expected. So let's pull up on our first stage here. All right, so our carriage is sliding along with the first stage. You can pull up on that carriage, and we are seeing movements, cascading motion, which is what you would expect to see. You can see the Dyneema rope is a little loose. That's one of the reasons we include the tensioning pieces on the carriage. All you would have to do is basically loosen up the 2 bolts here and then use a 1/2 inch wrench to pull more rope, more cable around that, and then re-secure it. Expect these to stretch over time as you use it. So that's why we include those in the design. And then you would just do that again for the other side, so you have some redundancy. So let's just show the process of how you would tension your rope once it gets loose like this. So first we're going to loosen up the bolt that the rope is wrapped around. Okay. And then we'll loosen up the tensioning guy here. So we've got that loosened just a little bit. And now as you'll watch, as we start to tighten it here with our wrench, oh my gosh. You watch as we start to tighten it here with our wrench, it's actually going to pull this rope around and tighten this whole thing up, which is exactly what you want. And then you can snug this back up here. Make that nice and tight. And now your cable should be a lot tighter. You could do the same thing for the top side too, because you got to remember the tension may be different on each side of the clamp on the crossbar.